Turkey's President Erdogan has vowed to press ahead with the constitutional changes approved in a referendum which vastly expand his presidential powers. His victory was closer than expected, with 51.5% of the vote. Opposition leaders plan to challenge the result due to irregularities, including the acceptance of unstamped ballot papers at counting centres. Well, we can talk now to the editor of the London-based Turkish newspaper Haber, Michael Daventry. Thanks for coming in. Do you think he has a mandate for these new powers?
Well, yes, because he needed 50% of the vote plus one, and that's what he got. He got 51% of the vote, and that's the first big takeaway from this election, the fact that he's able now to implement the reforms, and that by the next general election he will be able to put in place an executive presidency system for which he can put himself up for election and probably win. But the second takeaway, and I think this is really quite significant, is that in my memory this is the first time I've ever seen the Turkish opposition refuse to concede a general election or a referendum or any national election result. It's significant because normally they go, all right, it's a fair cop, President Erdogan's party was better than ours, we didn't manage to convince the electorate, the result was fair, the campaign may not have been fair, but we'll accept the result. Now it's different. Now they're talking about voter fraud, they're talking about challenging the results, there's even talk of civil disobedience. So it's a very significant and different moment, I think.
In the end, though, would there be much support for civil disobedience or any sort of ongoing protest that could actually upset what has happened here?
It depends on how the opposition behave going forward. The next couple of days will be very interesting. In about 45 minutes from now, the international observers who monitored the election are going to give their preliminary results, so that will be an indication to see whether an impartial outsider view shares the opposition's view. But then it also depends on what the opposition parties do in the days and weeks to come, see if they can galvanise what appears to be at least a massive, massive minority of voters who don't want this fundamental change in the way that Turkey is run.
How important will the report of those international observers be?
Well, they've reported before, and they've talked about how the campaign was unfair in previous general elections. They've always said the governing party gets more airtime on television, for example. But they've always said that the voting process itself is generally spot on. The opposition this time is saying that it's that voting process. There's a complicated issue about the presiding officer of the ballot boxes who needed to stamp the back of valid votes, and the election authorities saying those votes will be counted as valid even if the stamp isn't there. Essentially put, the opposition is saying that the voting process was not fair. If the international observers agree, then it's a very seriously different situation.
The President says he needs the new powers for security in the country. He also says the new system of government is going to be similar to the presidential system in France and the United States. What do the opposition say?
Well, what the opposition says is that it isn't that. It isn't a French-style or an American-style system. This is a Turkish-style system. The president is going to be granted vast ranges of powers to appoint regional governors, senior judges, party officials, and more than that, it's a lot harder now to scrutinise the president. Under the current system, if you in Parliament wanted to take the Prime Minister or a minister and investigate him on any kind of wrongdoing charge, it takes 18 days under the present rule. Under the new system, it can take up to 10 months, and more MPs need to vote for it as well. So it's a lot. The checks and balances system in Turkey has been completely upended by this.
What path is Turkey now on? I mean, particularly with regards to aspirations for EU membership.
Well, President Erdogan yesterday gave two victory speeches, and his first victory speech was very measured, and he said it's time for unity, we've got to come together, let's try and work together to build this new Turkish system. But then he went outside to address the huge crowds of supporters that he had outside the presidential palace in Istanbul waiting for him, and he told them that if the opposition doesn't deliver on reinstating the death penalty, then he's going to put that to a referendum. The two President Erdogans are conflicting with each other. It really depends on which President Erdogan we have going forward. For the past 15 years, he's been, generally speaking, a realist. He's responded to the public mood when things go awry. But if he starts pushing, for instance, the reinstatement of the death penalty, I can't see how the EU membership process can survive that.
Michael Daventry, thank you. An update on our headlines on BBC News.